Omatase shimashita. Thank you for waiting. Like I said, there's a seat here. Mind. Welcome everyone to the info session for IAP in Ancient and Modern Japan. So we're going to take some time today to tell you how we're envisioning a trip at this point. It's going to go over some of the information that's already on the application website. But hopefully, maybe the most helpful part will be the Q&A session towards the end, that we can field any direct questions that you might have. But what's not on the website right now is some of the highlights of the actual trip itself that I'll be walking us through, along with all the various requirements. So I generally have this agenda today in mind. We'll introduce us to the trip leaders, itinerary, and what we're envisioning, sort of the content, curriculum, eligibility, accommodation, expenses, nuts and bolts, application process, mainly deadlines, and then any questions that you might have for us. So, but I'm really glad to see all these faces and your interest in this trip. Without further ado, so there are three sort of leaders, organizers of this trip. My name is Hitomu Nakahara. I'm a historian of Japan here at MIT. And we also have Christine Pilkovich here, who is the managing director of the MIT program, as many of you know, and have already been there's also Aikawa Sensei, who's the senior lecturer in Japanese, whose classes many of you may have already taken or are taking right now. And I think as it turns out, all three of us, I think, grew up in Japan. So you are also having native. So I grew up in Kanto, Tokyo area. You grew up in
Kanto and Osaka.
Kanto and Osaka.
Kanagawa and Osaka.
Okay.
I grew up in IAP area.
So Nagoya area. Yeah, so we're kind of covering the main Honshu island from east, central to west. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of our different roles in it, maybe later on. I'm going to sort of, I'll talk us through the sort of main content of the trip. I'm working with both Aikawa Sensei and Chris to sort of come up with the sites we're visiting, the curriculum that we'll be doing, workshops, things like that. And Aikawa Sensei, Chris, please feel free to chime in as we're walking through the different places. So the overview, right, is this is a roughly just over 2-week-long trip during this smack middle of IAP in January of this coming year, 2026. The idea is to have everyone arrive in Tokyo on January 10th. And then I think what we haven't made the final decision yet, but I think what we're envisioning right now is that given that we'll be out in their home or may not all be in Boston during the holidays, that we're envisioning sort of Tokyo being the main spot, and we'll sort of figure out and communicate the actual logistics of that trip itself. Oh, and by the way, this is the first time we're doing this trip. It is a bit piloty, so bear with us as we do that. But also, thank you for joining us for this, right? For this pilot iteration of this experience. And I should also give credit to Chris, who is, I think, probably the main person who has made this happen. Ever since we've come in touch here at MIT, she's been asking me, so, are you going to organize an IAP trip about Japanese history? And I said, so here we are. And the idea, as you can see here, is that there's going to be 4 stages. So we're going to start in Tokyo area for a few days, get you acclimated, hopefully to the jet lag as well. It's going to be like dry and hopefully mostly sunny in Tokyo in January. At least that's the typical Kanto weather. So it should be very pleasant, much warmer than here, although it's still proper winter. And then we'll spend a couple days in Kyoto and Nara. Nara being the site of the very first sort of permanent capital of ancient Japan, mainly in the 8th century. And Kyoto, of course, as many of you may already know, became the capital of Japan in 794, and remained so until the year 1868, when the emperor moved from Kyoto to what was a city that was renamed Tokyo, right? Eastern Kyoto or Eastern capital. And so we'll spend a couple of days there, primarily sort of visiting sites that connect to some of these early histories. And then we'll move on to Hiroshima, spend a couple of days there, Tokyo, and then we'll depart on January 26th. So a couple of things about each places or each segment of this trip. So the first part of this trip, again, we're going to use part of it to acclimate ourselves physically, climatically, whatever else adjustment you need to make. But this is going to be kind of a hybrid historical sort of point of the trip. So Tokyo, before it became Tokyo in 1868, was known as Edo, right? And it became the capital of the Tokugawa shogunate from the early 1600s. And by the year 1700, if you've taken my class, you have already heard the spiel. Edo had become a city of at least 1 million people living in that city, and therefore by population, almost certainly the largest city in the world. And so we'll be exploring partly in this first part the Edo history, the city of Tokyo as a early modern, pre-modern metropolis. The picture here is actually of an indoor museum that I visited this past January in an area called Fukagawa, which is kind of associated with traditional sort of part of Tokyo even to this day. And it actually replicates sort of neighborhoods of Edo period, and you can actually walk into the houses, and it's very, very interesting. So hopefully we'll be visiting there among other places. Asakusa, you may have heard of it. You almost certainly have seen the picture of the big red lantern, right? It's a huge tourist destination now. Was always a huge tourist destination, actually, even during the Tokugawa period when it was a center of massive pilgrimage and commerce. And so it always had tourists visiting. And so hopefully we'll be visiting there as well. But we'll also use that time to sort of get in touch with the transition from Tokugawa, early modern, samurai Japan, as it were, into the modern era, into 19th century, when Japan goes through massive social, cultural, economic, and political change. And as part of that, we've just got a confirmation that we have an appointment, a guided tour? No. Or at Meiji Jingu, a guided tour at Meiji Jingu, which is this huge Shinto shrine complex in downtown Tokyo. In the middle of the metropolis is this huge, actually, swath of forest with a shrine that is dedicated to Meiji Emperor, the emperor who oversaw Japan when Japan went through this modernizing transition. And we actually have, thanks to Chris, connection to the shrine, and we will be getting personalized tour of that place. On the same day, we are also hoping to visit the National Diet. The Diet is the funny English term for the Japanese Parliament, the seat of the national government. In fact, according to the Japanese Constitution, the Diet is the highest governing political organ of the present-day Japanese state. And so if things work out, we will be able to also meet with a current member of the parliament, a politician, but we'll at the very least be getting tour through the Diet building, which is a very different kind of scene, right, from either Fukagawa or Meiji Shrine. And then during this trip, actually, we'll be meeting with students from Keio University, not once, but twice. Keio University, if I recall correctly, I think is the oldest private university in Japan. It's certainly one of the most prominent private universities in Japan. And on the first leg, we'll be visiting the Mita campus, the downtown Tokyo main campus of Keio University. I have a colleague who works there, and he will bring himself and his students to interact with us and give us a tour of the campus. The founder of Keio University was a guy named Fukuzawa Yukichi, who until very recently adored the 10,000 yen bill. He was the portrait on that, the most highest denomination currency in Japan. He's kind of this symbol of Japan's modernization in some sense. He's the one who was the prolific introducer of Western ideas to Japan in the 19th century. And he founded like the first university, the first newspaper, things like that. He built the first public lecture hall because he wanted to encourage Japanese people to engage in democratic politics and debate and so forth. He also sent his second son to here, to MIT. Steijiro Fukuzawa, who graduated in the 1880s from course 1, studied railroad building and management. And so there's actually a very interesting MIT connection that we'll hopefully be revisiting with that visit as well. And I think, hopefully on that visit, we'll also be making you eat Japanese cafeteria food, which is actually excellent. On the second leg, we're going to be going to Kyoto and Nara, as I mentioned, the ancient capitals, right, of Japan. We will be visiting some of the oldest existing wooden structures in Japan, including Todaiji, where I think hopefully we'll be getting some personal tour. Again, thanks to Chris's connections. Todaiji is one of the oldest existing sort of Buddhist temples in Japan, dating back to the first half of the 8th century, the 700s, right? And in that actually same general temple complex is also an 8th century imperial storehouse called Shosoi, which to this day contains artifacts from Japan's long history and connection to the broader world, including sort of objects like Roman and Persian glass that came through the Silk Road. And I think we can't get inside the imperial storehouse. You might not be surprised, but there is a major national museum very nearby, and so hopefully we'll be making a visit and seeing both sort of the outside and inside of this museum as well. But Kyoto, right, as many of you may already know, is home to hundreds, thousands of shrines and temples that are hundreds, more than 1,000 years old, right? It's also home to Japan's sort of sites that are connected to Japan's early film industry, sort of contemporary post-war culture, rock. There's actually a big kind of like rock alternative music scene in Kyoto as well. It's really fascinating city. Also a wonderful kick-ass keema curry restaurant that I love. That's like hole in a wall, and you have to line up at the beginning or else you won't get in. So we will probably be encouraging some individual exploration as part of this. And in fact, for all of the major sort of areas, one of the things that we're trying to determine right now is the balance between sort of program and sites visits versus individual explorations. And our hope is that each day you will have some portion of that as well to explore the different cities that you'll be in, hopefully guided by some of our visits, but something that you can find out on your own as well. The picture is the great Buddha from Todaiji that was, I think, built by Korean artisans. And for the eye-opening ceremony for this Buddha, at least the historical record says that there were monks from India who were invited. And so it was sort of one of the symbols of Japan being a kind of a cosmopolitan place, even that early on, with deep connections, right, to the Asian continent. We will also be visiting Hiroshima, right, which all of you have heard of, the site of the first atomic bombing in the world, and in fact, one of the only two places, right, that had been atomic bombed. Part of this will be actually, I'll be introducing us to my family's history. So I grew up in Kanagawa in the greater Tokyo area, but the Nagaharas actually originate in the city of Hiroshima. The Nagaharas served as samurai, the feudal lord of Hiroshima, since the early 1600s. And so, especially from, I think, the 1700 onwards, my family had lived in this compound that is very close to Hiroshima Castle, which sort of has been reproduced, but the castle compound still exists, which also happened to be really close to the hypocenter, where they dropped the atomic bomb. And so I'm part of the trip. I will introduce us to sort of some of the sites that are connected to my family's experience of the bombing. My grandfather, who was in middle school at the time of the bombing, survived it, thankfully. Many of his family did. Right. And there are sort of different sites and things like that. But the neighborhood that my family experienced and grew up in was completely flattened by the bombing. But happens to be there are some remains and sort of gardens and things like that connect to that, both to the history of the experience of the bombing, but also to the longer, earlier samurai history of Hiroshima, which in fact was for a long time an important city in that part of Japan. The main part of the visit to Hiroshima, though, will be about visiting the Peace Memorial Museum, which is a huge sort of memorial and historical commemorative site. We will also be arranging for all of us to meet with one of the few remaining hibakusha, or the actual survivor of the atomic bombing. As you can imagine, they are getting very elderly. There are a few of them left, but Hiroshima is a city that gives us the opportunity to speak to and hear from and interact with the hibakusha. So hopefully that'll be a meaningful experience. It is a city. The Hiroshima area, again, has a sort of long history of part of sort of Japan's pre-modern history. So we'll be getting in touch with part of that history by visiting also an area called Miyajima. You might have seen photos of a shrine with the torii gate that's in the middle of the sea. That's the Itsukushima Shrine in Miyajima, because Hiroshima actually faces the inland sea, right? Which for a long time has been kind of the main conduit of Japan's connection to sort of connecting different parts of Japan, right, through maritime transport, but also connecting the Japanese archipelago to the continent and the broader world. And Itsukushima Shrine is a very, very interesting site that you can go, you cross a ferry and things like that. Also, there'll be extremely aggressive deer. Actually, both in Itsukushima Shrine and in Nara as well. So you'll get that experience for what it's worth. We will be, in our final leg, going back to Tokyo. And we will kind of, on this part, experience more of the modern/contemporary part of Japanese history and Japan today and maybe Japan future. So what I'm envisioning, for example, for us doing is visiting a particular neighborhood of Tokyo that has become a little bit famous, but I think preserves sort of the older modern, so think mid-20th century, early to mid-20th century sort of lifeways, city structure, culture of the city. And this is a part that's known nowadays oftentimes called Yanesen, because it connects three neighborhoods, Yanaka, Nezu, and Sendagi, which is actually just northeast of a major park complex called Ueno Park, or Ueno. It has the zoo. It has Japan's first modern zoo, a bunch of first modern museums. Ueno was actually a battleground in 1868, one of the few battlegrounds between the forces that wanted to keep the samurai regime and the other ones who were trying to overthrow them. But after the battle, the new government basically turns it into a modern park. You can actually see, I think, some gates and structures with like bullet holes and things like that. So maybe we can try finding that as well. But the idea is we'll take us on a kind of a walking tour of the neighborhood Tokyo, as it were, which will be very different, right, from the kind of urban skyscraper-y part of Tokyo. We will also be meeting on that leg with a second group, not the same group, but the second group of students from Keio University's Shonan Fujisawa campus, which is in Kanagawa Prefecture, just south of Tokyo, my home prefecture. And we will be actually visiting Yokohama, which is a major port city just south of Tokyo. It was one of the treaty ports, the first treaty ports that were open to the West in the middle of the 1800s. It was also the city where not my Nagahara great-grandfather, but my mother's side great-grandfather snuck on a steamer in 1895 when he was 15 years old. Because he wanted to go to America, and he made it. So I have relatives in like New Jersey. My grandma was born in New Jersey because of that. But it's long been kind of modern Japan's one of modern Japan's major connecting port to the West and to the wider world, and it has a lot of sort of artifacts, buildings, museums, archives that are connected to that history. The idea is actually a group of Keio students, along with my colleague who teaches there, will be kind of go on that trip with us. And this is a group of students who, for this campus, actually, some of them will be Japanese. So for those of you who want to practice Japanese, you'll be able to do that. But my understanding is that my colleague will also bring along his students from the program at his university at Keio's SFC campus that does their curriculum in English. And so there'll be kind of, I think, multinational, multicultural group of students who are living and studying in Japan, and hopefully you'll be able to sort of hear from their experience as well. We're hoping to end that leg by visiting some sites that might be connected to contemporary, very contemporary, and maybe futuristic Japan. I actually have not visited there. You have, right? Team Labs places. So can you tell us what is Team Labs and what?
Well, it started as a startup of university student and one person vision who found concerts happening in major metropolitan areas, but he was up in Hokkaido, didn't get to interact, and he wanted to find a way how you can be part of concerts and vision, and ends up 5 students from a university creates a company that bridges technology, art, concert, interaction, and they have formed installations in different offices to creating museums around the world, of which there's currently several, some out in nature, like the one in Osaka, but the 2 that are in operation in Tokyo, one is newer in the center of Tokyo, is these interactive museum that have sensors and, who's a course 6, right? I mean, we also have internships with them that our course 6 and 2s have gone to, that you get to really be part of the museum. You get to change what's on the exhibit. And some of the exhibit actually, I'm not sure of the one currently, but was lifetime with another museum. It was in China. So whatever you did, they saw it over there, and whatever they did, you were together. So it's fascinating.
That sounds fascinating. So hopefully, right, we'll be able to bring you to some of the kind of contemporary aspect of Japan as well. Those of you who are out in the hallway, there are a little bit more space. Sorry that the room is really tight. But maybe if we could squeeze people in.
One person can come over here too. I can stand.
ごめんね. So that's the broad, right? There are sort of more specifics that we'll talk about once we have the program going and once we selected the people who are going and so forth. But let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. Well, a little bit actually about curriculum. So this is not a credit-bearing class, so you will not be doing that kind of coursework per se. But we hope that we can give you enough of an intellectual and educational content to make much more out of this trip than if you were just kind of going on a tourist visit to Japan, right? We will be visiting these sites. You will be accessing people and individuals with direct experiences of history, like hibakusha, or people who are part of running Japan, hopefully right now, right? Like members of the Diet. But also, we will sort of have some small mechanisms, like short, maybe not quite daily, but short readings along the way that I'll expect everyone who's on the trip to do, so that we can have some background for some of the sites that we're visiting. That would be helpful for that. We will be doing some kind of individual or group journaling so that we can both reflect at the beginning of the trip, during the trip, and then towards the end, especially when we're interacting with our KO friends, to sort of take stock, right, of the different things that we're seeing and think about sort of how our own thinking about Japan, the world, history is changing over time. We will have sort of different opportunities to have sort of concentrated time to have group discussions. And so at the beginning of some of our major sort of site changes, so like when we arrive in Kyoto or when we arrive first in Tokyo, we will have some moments to sit down, sort of have conversation about the readings, about how we're thinking about the trip so far. And last but not least, we will be having some language workshops. So, Aikawa Sensei, would you mind talking to us a little bit about what you're envisioning so far? We're still very much in the process of making it, but sort of
That's right.
Yeah.
So I don't know the kind of the level of the participant, the Japanese proficiency levels. But what I'm thinking right now is, of course, you're going to go there, so you will see lots of like characters, and then so writing systems for sure. The history of writing system in Japanese. Also, of course, the characteristics of the Japanese language. And I'm also interested in, like, because you're going to travel to different areas, so maybe introduce kind of dialects, the differences in Japanese dialect. And lastly, well, not lastly, but I'm also personally interested in AI, how AI actually interpret the Japanese language. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about AI and the Japanese language connection. Right? But that I think I'm more than welcome to hear that, what you would like to want to know, something like this. But that's so far.
Wonderful, thank you. And as I said at the beginning, right, sort of the heart of this trip will be these guided group site visits to different interesting historical sites, contemporary sites, and things like that. But we'll try to balance each of our days with between that on the one side and individual explorations. Because frankly, one of the things that I personally enjoy when I'm in Tokyo or Kyoto or any part of Japan is just these places are eminently walkable, right? And sort of endlessly walkable. I rack up when I'm in Tokyo every day over 20,000 steps. Part of it is because you're forced to, because you're going from like the different sites and then going on subways and things like that. And so if you've done your Misty in Japan, you might have already experienced that. In fact, you do walk more when you're in Japan. But it's also really fun. The weather will be much more pleasant than when we're going than it is in the summer and so forth. And so hopefully that'll be a fun part as well. So a couple logistic things. So let's see if I'm just going to skip ahead. So the application is open right now, right? And it will close on October 3rd. I'll come back to this slide. And by the way, this information is already available on the Misty Global Classroom website and application portal for this trip. But we are envisioning, sort of given our funding constraints and sort of the general logistic of the trip, to bring along roughly about a dozen people to this trip. That is also probably the maximum of sort of what we can do comfortably in terms of bringing a group of people to museums, sites, and so forth. So keep that in mind. And as it already says in the application website, this trip is primarily designed to encourage both to acknowledge and sort of deepen the experience of people who have already, invested heavily in various Japan studies classes at MIT. So if you've taken a lot of Japanese language classes or Japanese history classes or whatever else, right? It's partly designed for people like that, for whom this will be sort of a capstone experience, right, at MIT. At the same time, it's also, we're hoping to bring along people who may not have taken that many Japanese classes, maybe taking just one class, all right, but hope to, are interested in, are serious about engaging in Japanese language, Japanese culture, Japanese history classes here at MIT during the rest of your MIT career, for whom this might be a nice sort of kickoff, right, experience. And so we'll be looking, I think, as a kind of committee to figure out sort of what is a good balance of those people. And so keep that in mind. And the application form questions are designed to encourage you and enable you to express that, right? Whether you have experiences or whether you have serious interests in the Japanese curriculum at MIT. Accommodations, expenses, and fees. So this trip is very heavily and generously funded by both the SHAS Misty Global Classroom Fellowship, and in fact even more so by the MIT Japan program. And so a huge part of the cost of the trip, including things like round-trip airfare, group transportations within Japan. In fact, including I had this picture as the cover for this trip because this is a picture that I took this last January from Shinkansen, the bullet train, because there is a short moment that you have to be ready for when you're going from Tokyo west to Osaka and Kyoto direction. That you're going to be going through tunnels. Can't be distracted because there's going to be one moment when this vision opens up on the right side of Shinkansen, and you're going to have like 30 seconds to a minute where you have a sight, and especially in the winter when the sky is clear, but we'll be doing a lot of Shinkansen travel, right? We'll be, in fact, between these major sort of metropolitan areas, we'll be traveling on Shinkansen. And so, Shinkansen travel, our group visits to different sites within these cities, hotel accommodations, museum fees for these group site visits will be covered by the program. What's not covered is your own individual explorations during the free time, and any sort of we'll be figuring out I think our hope is that with the funding we will be able to cover a decent chunk of your meals, even when you're going off on individuals. But what we will be probably saying is beyond a certain amount you're on your own. And so yes, by all means, if you want to go to a multiple mon omakase extravaganza, please do that, but sorry, we can't pay for that. We do ask for a $1,000 student fee, although if you are on financial aid, it will be prorated. And so however much amount that you are covered by financial aid, that will be reflected in the actual student fee that will be asked from you. By the way, this photograph I took over 10 years ago. It's in a part of Tokyo called Tsukuda. And it's an interesting place because on the one hand, you have these massive high-rise apartment buildings that I personally wouldn't live in if I lived in Tokyo, because I've heard of stories of people getting stuck during earthquakes. And imagine having to walk down that thing. So they built this stuff on this island that's a kind of a man-made island in Tokyo Bay. But this part here, and in particular this sort of kakko, this particular 90-degree angle canal, has been around since the middle of the 1600s, when a group of fishermen were invited by the Tokugawa shogun to come to Edo and fish for the shogunate. And so this is a part where sort of one of the few places in modern-day Tokyo where the literal kind of physical infrastructure of Edo remains largely untouched, even as it's literally juxtaposed to sort of hyper-modern residential areas. And we're hoping to visit that during our trip as well. Let me see. Okay. Meiji Shrine, Cozy Cafe in Shinjuku area. That's Team Lab. All right. So key dates. Application is open. As I said, it's due on October 3rd. Accepted applicants will be notified by October 20th. There will be sort of deposit due shortly after that. And then we have not set up the specific dates, but we will be having mandatory pre-departure orientation meetings to help you get ready for that trip. This is a photograph from Shinjuku Gyoen, which is a beautiful park. So Tokyo is this kind of contrast between just completely built up areas and then these very large, beautiful parks. And Shinjuku Gyoen is in fact one of the most dramatic sort of contrasts, because Shinjuku is this hyper built up part of Tokyo. It's also part of Tokyo that I'm most familiar with because I grew up in the suburbs, but the train line that I used would end up in Shinjuku area. So Shinjuku is in a sense it's my Tokyo. But there's this large park that was created by the modern Japanese government that's been around since early 20th century at the latest. And it has, like, among other things, a beautiful Chinese-style pavilion, another pavilion that not Meiji Emperor, but the second Emperor, Taisho Emperor, used when he visited the garden, things like that. It's a huge garden. And we will probably be going there maybe our very first full day there, partly to, like, get you out in the air as you're, like, acclimating from jet lag and stretch your leg and things like that. But Chris or Aikawa Sensei, any other additional thoughts or items? I think one logistical things that we'll be talking to you once we kind of really get in earnest to prepare for the trip is things like visa. If you're an international student, not from the U.S. and come from a country that doesn't have a reciprocal visa agreement, which is a thing that it's worth finding out if your country has that agreement. Many countries do, so check that. You'll need to be applying for visa and things like that, and we will help you with that process. Chris is extremely experienced, as many of you already know.
And must have a valid passport.
First of all, you should also all have a valid passport.
Minimum,
yeah.
6 months
6 months,
forward
Yeah.
from January, right? So
Yeah.
should be valid until July, August 2026, which mine is not, so I need to get a new passport.
So that is it in terms of overview and walkthrough, and so we'll be happy in the 15 minutes or so that we have left to take any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer. As I said, we're still very much in the process of kind of building up some of the specifics of the program, but we will try to answer any questions that you might have. Any questions? Yeah.
I take it you wouldn't be able to do this and IDJ.
Yeah, we thought you might, but there's a date overlap because IDJ is starting a little bit earlier than usual. Yeah. It would have been quite the combination.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, hand right there, yeah.
I'm not sure if I missed it, but in terms of living, like housing accommodation.
Yes. It will be primarily, I think it will all be hotels.
Right, and it'll be probably double occupancy. If you request what we've done in the past, that if you want a single, that we ask for you to pay for the extra cost, and usually it would be the exact amount probably that it would cost for us to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Japanese hotel reservations work differently than in the United States, unfortunately.
But some places, depending on, we're working on it to get like maybe a larger room so you can experience like the tatami mat with the futon. That might be 3 or 4 people per room instead.
Capsule hotels. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I couldn't do that. Any other questions? 2, so why don't we start with front here and then back?
How does the prorated fee work for graduate students? Or does it not?
I don't know.
I'm
We have to get
sorry.
back to you.
Yeah. Email us and we'll try to, yeah.
What do you think the ratio of like group trip experience and on your own free time do you think there will be?
No.
I mean, what?
Go ahead.
No, what were you saying?
No. We don't want, it's not going to be you're going on a trip, paid for by MIT.
Yeah.
This is the majority. We realize that, 2 weeks is a long time.
Yeah.
We want you to take care of your health as well. There's adjustment time, so that's why we have that extra time for you to explore, and that could be going back to the hotel and resting if you're not, if you're tired. So it's not going to be like, oh, you're going to have, let's say if it's 9 to 9 per day, it's not that we're going to be on 100%, but, a good chunk of the morning.
I mean, right now the way that we're thinking about it is we'll start, so sometimes, it might start in the afternoon, but oftentimes we'll start in the morning, and then, we'll have lunch together at the site that we're visiting, and maybe we'll do one more thing, right, before kind of releasing you to individual exploration. My children oftentimes accuse me of putting them on these endless death marches. around Tokyo, and I will try not to do that, even though I'm so excited about so many different places that I could potentially take you, but I'm trying to restrain myself. And so hopefully I will succeed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will there be merch for the trip?
Merch for the trip. What does that mean?
Like a historical T-shirt, maybe like encompassing the different places
Oh.
that you went
That is we have not talked about that. Thank you for the idea.
to. Yeah.
You are wearing a merch.
And so am I.
Yeah.
Is there like an expected Japanese proficiency for the trip?
Not really. So we're hoping again to have a fairly diverse range. And so, but I think the more important thing is, how we hope that this will not be a one-off experience for you
That's right.
with the Japanese curriculum and program here. And so it's more of whether you'll be able to make the case that you can sort of, right, that you have that potential and commitment. But we don't really have a set. So if you're actually looking to take a Japanese class after this trip, I think that's still within the possibility. Yeah.
Are you planning on having anything like culinary related, like a food tour or going to like food market and things like that?
So we haven't sort of thought about it in the context of very formal group tours, and one of the challenges will be like taking everyone to a particular place. Well, actually, let me track that back. I'm hoping, actually, that in some of our group meals, that we will be able to have some very interesting culinary experiences. There are also kind of maybe culinary experiences that might be better for smaller groups. And so I am happy to think about, and I think Chris and I will be the ones who will be with you during the whole trip. And so we might think about sort of dividing and taking smaller groups of folks to like different culinary experiences along the way. And so if you're interested in that, right, give us some ideas, right, of things that you might be interested in. Yeah, because there are places that like I would not be comfortable taking the whole dozen plus group, but we'll be happy to, take a subset and, like to my favorite Japanese style curry place in the old books district of Tokyo.
Right, so not how to
Curry
say
and
it.
books. But yeah, no, I think I haven't really spoken about it because in some sense, in my own upbringing and experience of Japan, it is a given that if you are in Japan, you will have good food. And so, but that helps me sort of think about maybe more intentionally about how we might introduce that to you.
But we will consider because, for example, kaiseki is a UNESCO heritage intangible item.
Yes.
So we'll do things like that
Yeah.
that accentuates like some of the values and cultural attributes of
Yeah.
Japanese culinary as it stands as a global phenomenon.
Great question. Yeah.
Does this trip count for any credits?
No, this is not a credit-bearing class at this point, at least.
So I'm guessing this is something you're hoping to continue on to like following years.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, feel free to email me. My email address should be on the program application site. So feel free to email me. And we look forward to receiving your applications. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. Thanks for coming. Okay. Have a great day.